Julian, first of all, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I know you said that you didn't know that you would drift into the visual arts, but rather music was your first love.
I thought I would spend maximum of my time with music when I grow up, when I was a kid. I thought that would be pleasant to do, interesting to do. But when I lost my right arm, I was confused for good 4 or 5 years. My desires, suddenly I have been robbed of my desires. And the people were not very helpful because they would offer pity. I don't want pity. I want a reality and support. Since I have ability to move the pencil or charcoal, I just start scribbling. I said, that's fascinating. That's the way it started. I said, why not?
So music would have been the preferred vehicle because of your arm and the difficulties with that, and
absolutely.
And shifting to say, maybe I can channel these same desires, thoughts, feelings in a different way.
Yes. You get terribly affected by the nature, because that area that I have been to, it was East Equatorial Africa, and it is a jungle next to me. It was on the border of jungle, just walking distance, half a mile, and we were between savannah and the jungle, which extended itself all the way to Belgium, Congo. And the phenomenon of the light source, changing colors, and vegetation, it's really a paradise lost. I never saw anything like that, and I was terribly affected by it. And especially I was affected by it because in Russia I experienced winters and gray, cold and whatnot. But then being in Iran, in Tehran and so on, deserts and going all the way to Basra, it's nothing but desolate deserts and dry. You get fascinated by that. Or in India, actually Pakistan, Karachi, and then suddenly you come in and you sit on the equator in this luscious jungle. And the phenomenon of the life that exists over there, as I said, it's a paradise.
Was there something special about Africa?
Well, yeah. What God created, it's unbelievable. Look at zebra. Almost when you see it for the first time, if you never saw one, and especially in the wild, I said, this must be a joke. Or giraffe comes in, and looks down at you, it's unbelievable. How can't you be affected if you never saw one before? Or the flowers, or the plants, or the sounds, or the beat of the drums. It's scary if you don't know what's going to happen next. There was a Jesuit brother in the camp, a refugee camp, and he was writing daily events, what happened in the camp, and he needed somebody to help him to illustrate that, And he saw some of my drawings, and he says, would you do this? I did it for him.
But I take a look at something like this, which I guess it's what, an ink?
Yes.
Ink drawing. But I mean, even with this, it's a series of like
dashes, lines,
dashes, crosshatches.
Yeah. Well, trying to do it with the simplistics of the line, try to mimic more or less, what is happening over there. Those are the huts, made out of a grass, that I lived in. Or like, for instance, this thing you see, just tree and other things. It's the damn mist, a fog, or, and the smell and or the wetness, there are so many things that are happening around us.
I mean, did you crave or did you want some sort of formal training, either in Africa? When you were in Africa?
Because I was asking myself, just how come these people seem to know so much visually, so many things, and where is art? What is art? What is decor? All this separation? What is the pattern making or painting your face? And what is really a shareable human experience when we call it art? So I went to Boro Polytechnic, and Boro Polytechnic, just chairman of the department, he says, well, I advise you, what you could do is book illustration. So that's why I had this scratch boards, and I was trying to make this lettering, and there was a life drawing and everything else, and the art history and whatnot. The school was known more or less for medicine and law, not for art. But they did train art as well, especially for teaching. When I came to America, I came with one suitcase and 4 of us. $50 in my pocket, 4 of us, 1 suitcase, no jobs. And I wanted to go to school. It was rough.
After you got here to Cleveland, you enrolled almost right away at the Art Institute.
Yes, because I wanted to continue my education.
Talk about this drawing. I mean, what do you see in it? I mean, what's the activity?
Well, it was the line itself, how beautifully can present duality. You make a line, you are not looking at the line, but both sides. A line is so instrumental to form separate densities of the field. It would be forward, inward, complex or non-complex. And then taking time of making darker surfaces, yet by opposing directional speeds of the linear aspect, it gives you a great cushion. So the surface is not dead surface, but it is racing and falling. Yet it is self-contained. The imposition of the realism, it is so selfish that it wants to be more and more realistic, being more like a photograph. A photograph wants to be a physical reality.
Let's take a look at, I guess this is a woodcut?
Woodcut, yeah. Well, everybody was cutting linoleum cuts, woodcuts, etchings, and so on. I was making a print, and with one hand, I couldn't afford linoleum or something like that. So I would pick up a scrap of wood somewhere, and try to chisel it out. But since having one arm, it's hard to push it in all the time and keep the instrument sharp enough to cut it. The woodcut is such an incredible invasion between dark and light, and very sharp edge. And I love that idea. So I can see clearly the visual activity and measure it. And I would violate the anatomical makeup in many cases because I knew what's there, but then I'm not illustrating anatomy. I'm trying to find out what the surface does when I violate between light and dark. And the woodcut is a beautiful medium to do that.
I think we've got one more here that brought out.
Well, this is probably even more evident, what I would do with the subject matter. Instead of putting all the facial features and whatnot, there is a further violation. It's just, yeah, I'm talking to you. That face is doing all sorts of things, telling me it's my friend. Shifts, moves, eyes, and whatnot. It's very active. So this activeness that maybe I can portray, help with the nose, eyes, and everything else. So it is a general, just a constellation of actions, one action over another actions when it comes to the totality of the human being. I painted this at Travis's class where everybody was licking and polishing figures.
Yes, so everyone else is doing very polished figures?
Yes, with the rosy cheeks and the lips, almost kissable. That's not hard. I saw this thing in the British collections, the portrait galleries and so on. I found they were just incredibly slick, schmaltzy. As I look at this figure standing, a black woman it was standing there, and I hear those drums, in Africa and everywhere else. And Paul says, Jambo, Bwana Kubva, Sabari, to me, I kept on slicing these things, I was slicing and putting it together, and there are triangles and all there she creates and the overlappings and these verticals, and the textures of the skin. I didn't have money for oil paints, you see, so I mixed everything I could find, the dirt on the floor and the sculpture room and everything else, glue it together with anything possible that glues together, like egg or Elmer's glue, and try to paint it, it's sand and mica in it.
Because I think of your painting as very much landscape painting.
Oh yes, I'm probably the most moved, by the landscape.
I look at a painting, again, we've talked about Provocative Current, this piece done in 1965. I think I was driving here, obviously, from Columbus today, but as I'm driving over that landscape and seeing those rolling hills,
yeah, that's exactly what it is. You see, you caress that land, you turn, you go up and down, and so on. How do you say that it's a fact? Things are changing, that you are moving, you are undulating, and it is very a landscape experience. So I start making these wiggles.
And so the wiggles really were in response to the landscape.
They were a strong response to the landscape. And also you start watching the water flow or cloud formation and the wind coming in, and how they form and how they pass. And they don't stop, don't rest. They just endlessly rippled away. If I can capture your time, attention, by my work, that's all what I'm interested. I want you, unmuddled, with your experiences, if it is a really provocative piece to you, to match to your lifetime experience somewhere, somehow, Not mine. I'm totally out of it. I did it because of me, my experiences. But hopefully I can create something which is more universal, that you can look at with a different life than mine.
This other painting here, this grass painting that's up, I think it's Rising and Falling is the name of that one. That obviously has a very different kind of beat to it. This one you've talked about the centrality of this lumina, but that one, at least to me, doesn't have the same kind of a centrality to it.
They are two different and very distinct human activities and response to them. So they exist in life. I love pure geometry, but it is a synthesis of such a complexity of life into a few singular situations. And then there are preferential treatments if it is square, vertical, horizontal, now and later type of a attitude. I offer the car first in this particular situation, while in the other one, I'm not always that clear. My mind is more in chaos than in a clarity. And I believe this is not only in me. The life is confusing. It is not a totally at random juxtaposition, because I can control the separate entity of from one piece to another. It can be at daybreak, it can be late at night, the saturation of light, or can be faster or slower. But I am not more singular as I am here, presenting specific situation. I am more complex in dishing out. So, parallel that any way you want, but that's the way I'm thinking. So, I have been searching for the better understanding of the visual phenomenon, so the geometry was offering that. But at the same time, looking at the nature, and the nature is endlessly in flux and hides its order of geometry. So now I am old enough, I'm painting them more or less now. I started earlier, but I'm more or less now concentrating on it. How wait? I am old enough to relax and be emotional only, not analytical. Always the first question I have is how good is it? Not what it says, what it provokes me, invites me to examine it, to look at it, to spend time with it, or admire a technical aspect, or all of that. It is a formalities to me. Everything dies, is being forgotten. What does really remain? And that is the basic core. Why do we need to create? Because we want to communicate with each other beyond this formality that we have, the verbiage, description, illustrations, and whatnot. You know, there is much more within us that we want to communicate with. This is also the spark for the people to have different religions. So to me, art is just the same kind of a drive.
Graduated from the Cleveland Art Institute in 1954.
Yes.
At what point did you decide to go to Yale to get your MFA?
Well, last year at the Institute, I was very hungry for the information. I said, what on how do I paint? What do I do? What is my visual field? And I can draw the figure and everything else already by then, so they don't accuse me of it. I'm slicing, dicing it, you know, and whatnot, scratching, using different materials, and I will ask questions. You know, why, for instance, I see more blue in the evening, why the red gets black, you know, in the evening, and whatnot, you know, all these different questions I would have, and I wouldn't have an answers. And then I know nothing how my visual apparatus functions, and the car is so bombastic and energy offering. I said, well, I would love to deal with this phenomenon because it is cosmopolitan. So I don't have to deal with the Western cultures or whatever, what is right, what is wrong, and all the other people's prejudices and pushes. The car is neglected. You know, it offers a powerful enters to our system in a very powerful manner. I like to capture that power. That power could be my ism. So I didn't have the questions, you know, I heard about Joseph Albers, you know, teaching car, that he was the only one that was pointed out to me, so I made the application to Yale to go to my graduate school. Every week there was a little talk about the paintings. He would choose the paintings from the group of students. He would sit down, we sit around or stand next to him. He would have a little easel, and a pointer. He would put the painting on the easel and just keep on negating everything. He wouldn't have a kind word. He would be almost screaming and jumping and accusing the people, of total imbecility and whatnot. So the people would have nervous breakdowns. Yeah, it was razor blades. And the next time he comes in and he looks at my dry pigments, because I couldn't afford my oils and I couldn't paint with oils anymore anyhow. And I was grinding my own cars with dry pigments, and he points at the pigments and he says, "Why don't you paint like that?" And he looks at the sketch on the wall, little sketches, I had plenty of them, and he looks at one sketch and he said, "Is that your finished painting?" I said, "No, it's a sketch." Oh, disappointed. So I tried to figure out how he sees, how the brilliancy of the dry pigment is fantastic. You cannot possibly retain that kind of a colorant on the surface.
How would you describe that your work relates to that of Albers?
I'm not Albers. I don't even resemble his personality. I could never be Albers. Yet Albers did clear out a lot of my confusion in my search. Albers is always there when I need him, but I need him so little all the time. At first, I fought him in my mind. Now I don't even think about it, I just appreciate him in the distance. Because slowly I had to emancipate from everybody in order to find myself. The form itself, as we talked even yesterday, the beat, the verticality, which I find extremely potent, and it is sympathetic to my system. I will use these lines, vertical lines, this beat is wonderful to have them, and so on. I don't think about Albers or anybody else. I'm maybe more thinking about, just Bach's organ, or I might be thinking, just about walking through the woods, or the shimmering leaves outside, So the parallels of what I see in life that I get attached to, or get intrigued by surprise. So I got caught by my own form.
Paintings like these that are behind us, the crystalloid blue and green.
Yes.
The middle mixtures here where you see on this edge the feeling of, it really mimics kind of the color that's here, and this edge, the interior of that edge kind of mimics the color here. It's kind of straight Albers interaction of color.
Those are very difficult to get, because it's just a phenomenon, yes. There's a phenomenon to observe. If you intermix in absolute percentage-wise, wavelength to wavelength, on the edges, it will appear like opposing or next door neighbor. This deception, which is that lie, it's the phenomenal trickery, energy. Again, I can label it plasticity of visual actions, which I am for it, because it goes through the metamorphosis of fact to something more or different, right?
How difficult is it to obtain those middle mixtures?
You have to be patient, especially in this particular type, because this is on a red side and green. The neutralization will occur by intermixing very fast. You get grays, mud, you know. So you have to keep on cheating as it reflects the light, percentage of light of one wavelength to another. So you do cheat in the process of mixing. You cannot mix it by physical proportion.
So if you did a pure physical proportion mix, visually it wouldn't...
No, this would get darker, much darker, by neutralization of the red and green would turn into black almost. I wanted the correct value progression as well, so to keep it lighter. But white in it changes the color. So the percentage will not be the same as you go along in order to have a true transition. All these lines or dots or whatever I would be using, I was using a lot of vertical lines because I love them. Love them for the reason that makes the surface alternate. It's never fully dead and offers change of color that I could never mix because the light reflected from the surface intermixes before it enters our eyeballs. So that became also a very important aspect to me because it offers a screen. Farther this screening out, you know. I was endlessly driving like Reinhardt would drive to absolute nothing, and nothing is everything. Since I'm terribly involved in the idea, you see, just minimalism, less, maybe I can say better if I have less, you know, that not the slogan, less is more, but it describes the situation. And have only a boundary run. That's what it is, a boundary run. Then I look at it and I say, okay, I took the eye for a walk through the embrace. That's going to be my primary reason. That's why I would do them on and off.
Every time you've talked with me about Yale, you've made a point out of saying that not only did you study with Albers, but you also studied with Conrad Marcarelli.
Correct. It was interesting. Conrad's work was very interesting to me. It was softnesses, linear expressions, very organic, and I was very much interested in the same thing. It was almost feeling, hey, wait a minute, somebody else is doing all this, you know, already so exquisitely, you know, give up. Yeah, that's my feeling was. I learned from him because he helped me not so much visually, but psychologically, that I can find my niche I should pursue, and my first obsession was color. Yeah, the biggest problem was, and still is, you see, because you have the color. And how do you accommodate it? Yeah. In what? What containers? You know, where should I get my containers? Geometric containers were too rough to cold. They are beautiful, but I'm so much in love with the nature. You know, nature doesn't present itself primary first in the strict up and down, horizontally and vertically. Yeah. How about the curve? And the curve is slows down, picks up, alternates, does all sorts of other things. The one gets infatuated by it. The more I see it all on the curve, I'm in the center of the circle of my life, or whatever. It's a very potent. That's why later on, as we went on, I made these circle paintings because of the infatuation, you see, of the potency of the curve.
Your work changed a tremendous amount in the, I guess, 6 or 8 year period from the time you graduated from Yale in 1956 and when you left Cincinnati in 1964.
I was trying desperately to clear out my thoughts and concentrate more or less within one particular philosophical projection using limited tools, that I would get further with understanding at least that segment. The linear expectations, you see, the beat and whatnot of line caught me totally and absorbed me, that whatever I was doing elsewhere, I felt, well, I have to finish this and get back to my lines.
And as you moved into the early 60s, the work doesn't seem composed of shape kind of amalgamations as much as you're saying, getting back to line and kind of the beat of line. And it's also typically paring down the colors to either two colors, near two colors. Julian, what were you doing with those paintings?
I reconcile with the idea that the line is very imperative then in my future work. I want to explore this further. Watching the behavior of the rhythms, you know, that even the children, the way they would play, dance, the way they would respond to my work and make a noise. It's just a very primordial response to the action. So I said, well, a human response to this action is very clear, very emphatic. You know, and let me see further what I can do. So I painted them, instead of in different colors so much, I painted a bunch of them in black and white.
But even in doing the black and white, you were thinking of them still in terms of how you would ultimately use those actions in connection with color paintings?
Yeah, because this is the foundation on which I would have to build, you know, and use more securely or confidently, you know, the color range that I wanted to present. I'm dreaming of absolute nothing, minimalist, and yet at the same time I couldn't shake off, somehow I was endlessly haunted by nature. It's a curse, you know. Nature imposition, you say, oh, well, I know it from nature. And the people are mad. You know, it's so difficult to divorce yourself and go purely to only non-representation, no, and so on. I'm not the type. So, and it's almost, I felt I was disrespectful for the things which are performing for me daily.
Julian, how did Martha Jackson come to first see your work?
I had a show in Dayton, Ohio, at the museum. It was my first museum show. And she has seen the show, and she looked at some of my work, and she says, Julian, I would like to have you in my gallery. Apparently she liked it, but at the same time, politically, it was correct for her to like it, because she knew very well that what was the director of the museum at that time, it was Seitz, yes, it was preparing Responsive Eye show later on. She knew that the movement will get some attention. I didn't know that there was such a movement. I was working on my work. I didn't work on any movement. So I came to the opening of my show, and on the window of Martha Jackson on 79th Street at that time, and Madison, I came to the building, and in the window there is a sign, Julian Steinchuk Optical Paintings.
So you didn't even know the title before
you
went to the opening?
I had nothing. I didn't know anything about it. And I looked at it, I walked in, was very perturbed. And I walked to see Martha and said, Martha, what did you do? You put optical paintings. And I said, wow, Julian, why you are so perturbed? This is something for the art critics to chew on. And she wouldn't budge, and they left me there. So I saw Richard Januszkiewicz, And Richard said, let's we discuss Joseph Albers together. And he says, let's go and ask him if he could see the show. And we just walked in, hello, Mr. Albers. And he said, hello, quickly, and points to the ad and says, Julian Steinschlag optical painting at the Martha Jackson Gallery. You know, you have to correct that. As Mr. Albers, I had no responsibility before to issue such a name, but I totally agree with you, you know, that this is wrong. Yeah. He said, should be called perceptual painting. That was Albers's comment. Optical painting is just saying the painting is visual. Why to say twice visual? You're a lawyer, you know that. You say, this is ridiculous. Optical, what does it mean? The other paintings, you don't use your eyes? No, decepting the eye, intriguing, in entertainment of the visual readings, confusing the visual readings. That's what the optical indicated. It's pattern making, in trivial manner, cute. Mm-hmm. That wasn't it. Martha comes up with a name like that, optical painting. And right after that, you know, when the painting, one of my paintings was reproduced in the Life magazine, in Time magazine first, didn't have the term. But Toni Borgziner, I knew she was working in the gallery there, and her son Richard Borgziner was writing for the New York Times, I believe. That's the paper, and he was also art critic, her son. And he made op out of it. And suddenly, op is going on. Op painting stuck immediately. And it was no deviation, no variations on the theme. And it was very powerful. How should I say? Loud, maybe is the word. Impressive way of affecting everybody around in the field of the creative, visual creative field in New York. Suddenly, pop art was not getting any limelight, but op art got all the attention. And philosophical clash occurred. And actually, the prejudices and rather venomous type of prejudices and expressions start to surface. Pop artists and those who were supporting pop art, you know, have been trying desperately to squash the idea of that movement. So they try to document and arm themselves with all sorts of information about the optics and try to throw at us, you know, as from science point of view. While in our case, you see, the science was as a tool. If it offered something, we took it because it's a new energy that allows us to continue manipulating all the other visual energies. I definitely say it was a movement, a very powerful movement. But then the pressures from the outside have been so powerful again, you know, in order to squash the movement. So many of the artists would give up the process of the investigation and the field of that visual concern and moved to join another groups in order to retain their limelight.
What, if you were to define what op art is, not as it relates to your painting, but in the terms of the op art movement, what would your description or definition of op art be? First of all, the way I looked, I can only speak so much for myself. Many artists would probably speak for themselves in different terms. My search of finding myself, looking for something more cosmopolitan,
that I communicate instead of shattering all the prejudices or ethnic belongings and whatnot, or group of people's belongings, cultural nests, to transcend all that and make it more fluid and open. So the optical art did not bring the luggage of large, recognizable, and sentimental, romantic, message bombardment. It has its own rights, and it was very close to me. So that's the way I would say why I would go into it. But to describe what it is, that is mainly your question. One way I am answering that is the search for the purity of the abstraction.
Search for purity of abstraction. I think many people who write about op art will stop after saying it's an investigation of the tools, and they kind of think of it as an investigation for its own sake. And I'm hearing you say investigate it so that then you can use it and understand it so that you can use it to create.
That's a first step.
The understanding is the first step.
That's right. The understanding your tools, your makeup, the processes, and the investigation of that. That's the first step. That invites you into it. But then what do you do with it? If you want to create art, you have to search yourself and say, okay, why do I want to create? So I watch very carefully how these situations affect me. So the effects of the certain makeups of the situations, these effects that I take, right? Yeah, and put them in juxtaposition that constitutes new reality.
Why do you think the public reacted so strongly and positively to op art? You talked about the lines at the Modern Museum.
Everybody was looking for change. Everybody was looking for total innovation, novelty of a visual shock. General public is looking for the entertainment. Second, it was so clear to any other ones. Suddenly you have optical so-called piece, shatters the other ones. You have to readjust your evaluation that the art can exist in variety of forms. Our contribution was very great because we did offer these new possibilities of looking at the area that we can innovate and open up. So the public was ready.
What phrase would you like used? Perceptual art, op art? No, you hated the term initially. Do you run away from it? It's stuck whether I like it or not.
Yeah, well,
it is.
Exactly. It is or it is not. It has a right to wear its wardrobe.
Right.
Art is singular. It can profess itself in many ways. And op art is one way, one dress. That's all what it is. There are so many more in the closet.
We've talked before about Albers. Is there anything else more that you think would make sense to talk about Albers here as in the same sequence, the same discussion?
I think the Albers was shocked to be driven into op movement. He probably hated the damn thing as much as I do. I like what it does. It's nothing but the terminology bothers me because it provokes wolves to attack, and not understanding the sincerity of the background. Albers, I was very fortunate for that brilliant mind that he had, that he stumbled on the idea of making his constellations, his pieces, in such a formalized way, with such a precision of measurement, of colorant to colorant, and offering this influence of one color to another. Not only that, but to create the tension of the position. So in this simplistics of just a square overlapping a square, putting it down in a particular manner. How many times you might have a square within the square? This tension's created within it. It's very melodical. That's a very powerful statement that he made. I wondered what he would do if he had another 85 years.
Why do you enjoy working with color so much?
It reaches our soul faster. And it has no scruples. It's no scruples. A color gives us immediate reaction to the warmth, cold, brightness. You know, it indicates the life, endlessly changing with the light. The flowers, the landscapes, they are all fantastic surprises. This energy that enters so potently into our nervous system, receiving it, you know, in such a pure manner without no luggage behind it almost, you know. That's what I like, because of that freedom that the car has, that is closer to abstract. So reaching for plateau where art might be. You know.
Julian, we talked some earlier today about the process that goes into the construction of a painting, and you talked at some length about the process of trying to think through what kind of coloration you wish to present, in what kind of arrangement you wish to present it, what kind of a background. So what would you, I mean, how would you go about the process? Again, you've just gotten up off the couch, you've just decided what you want to do, now it's time to do it. What do you do?
Now, first of all, if I decided how to distribute the elements that constitutes the makeup of the totality, make a pencil drawing on it, and then I go through the first set. That is, I prepare the color scheme. Let's say I am using greens. They I have mixed together with the reds. So I have test strips that I would mix them up in the progression. And since I have the progression of one colorant, then I have a progression of, make a progression of another colorant. And I try to match them in value. My next decision is which color should prevail, because I thought it all out in proportion. So I paint, let's say it should be green, with a particular change through the interactive process of the reds. Into it I will have more on the brownish side, I know. We'll kick a little bit of yellow in the lighter area, and slowly, when they are more true complementary, when they neutralize themselves, I might have closer to the grays, and when it drops lower in the key, I have a green and red, but then they will fuse to almost to absence of light, become almost black. So I know that from the experience. So that's exactly what I might want on a piece. Now, if the green should be on the cool side more, on green side, the whole piece, I paint the red first. So on that drawing, the whole constellation is painted in those colors.
How many coats? I mean, one coat?
Oh, sometimes it takes up to 6 coats to cover one color.
Okay.
The progression has to be the same, so it doesn't bleed through. Now, when that is done, that piece is done, then question is, how much of that green I need, and in the scale of its totality, how many lines I might need to have in order so I don't make the line win over the structure of the totality of the car interactions against each other, and also to preserve the makeup of a piece. So I choose the tape. Many of them I cut myself, or commercially. This is not the right size, but gives you the feeling of it, you know. And so I scrupulously laid the tape across, you know, in equal sequence. You know, there's a lot of adjustments. The small painting is easy because you can sit down and keep on doing it. The large paintings, you run around the table and try to keep on putting it together. Now,
how much of this do you do with a ruler, with mathematics, or is it it's visual?
Well, this distribution, it is by ruler.
Okay.
Yes.
For the initial distribution.
Initial distribution. Usually I put every second one first, then I put another in between in order to see that I am spacing it right. Then I see the melting points when they are too close or not too close, and so on, and try to adjust them until I satisfactorily accepts positioning.
But would you seal the red? I mean, after you put the reds down?
No. Let's say I have a red and I'm going to put a green. With the time, what is happening that one wavelength works itself through another wavelength and discolors the whole thing. So it's a question of permanency. Technically, to be correct, I seal this with the medium, acrylic medium in this case here, and once the tape is on. When that is dried, if I have to then paint it green, that's easy. Green will cover the red easier. So I paint the same pattern or design, distribution, you know, again with the green until I get to the last one around. When each coat, of course, might require many coats. It's a question of meeting the same places as I had the red underneath. And the whole thing, then the whole painting is again green, not red. When that is fully dry, I remove the tape naturally. You see, then I see this interactive process between the line, the correct color mixing. By removing it, that it's really a complete painting. You know? And when this is done, if I accept it, I see whether I have to make a correction, cleaning it up, and so on. Then the painting is sealed again with the medium, and that's about it.
How many paintings that do you kind of go through to completion, where you see the completed painting and then say this doesn't measure up? Again, nothing ever, you've said nothing ever measures exactly to the vision in your mind, but that doesn't measure closely enough that you say I'm going to destroy it and either not do it again or try to start over.
You know how this goes. It's just one works out very well, and if you want to have it in a series or something like that, that's the hardest part. Let's say you need 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 paintings together constitute one, and there are slight changes between them, and you want to control those changes. And you paint one, and fine, I'm glad. You paint another one. Wow, that's very good, you know. Then paint the third one. These first 2 are not good anymore because they reject it or they fuse together. Yeah, so you might have it all mixed up and presented to yourself in the formal way, but when it comes to the actuality, sometimes it's so difficult to predict because once they are next to each other, they do affect each other, and then you make an adjustment.
We have 3 of the 4 panels of a painting from 1984 called Pulsating there. You're telling me that I guess there were 144 color mixtures?
Yes, in this 4 panels, yes. So that's why I collect all these jars, you know.
But, I mean, it would probably take an enormous amount of time just to do the color mixtures and then to physically apply it.
Yes, it did. Anyhow, 144, yes, I remember I mixed 144 because somebody asked me. He says, wait a second, I'm going to count it for you. So I did. Usually I don't do that. Like somebody asked me, how long does it take me to paint it? 6 by 10 foot painting, put the stripes on it and distribute it correctly, And I said, wait a second, I tell you. So I measured the length of the canvas, which I know, and I had to walk around and put the tape. It's just I added all together. It became miles. I said, about so many miles. Since I am allergic to oils, I had to find my own ways to make my own paints, and I used a very crude acrylic type of a resin emulsion from DuPont company that was using it for treating the linen for better ironing. And I managed to get that. It was very expensive. For me it was, at least. So that was a binder that I could use dry cloths and mix it, grind it together. I kept on doing this for a very long time. So slowly the emulsion has been improved.
Do you enjoy the physical process of constructing the painting?
Good and the evil comes together. It's a terrible addiction. You have to see what you thought, documentation of your thought. Also, just to dream a beautiful dream and not to document the dream, not translating it to a physical reality, stays a dream. How can you share the dream? You have to have something in between, so physical reality. So I do reconcile with the fact it takes an awfully long time. Sometimes it looks like a self-punishment. You keep on working. You have to do it because you have to see it. Since you have to see it before you pass the judgment, I fail, I succeeded. Oh, that's what it is now when I translated my dream into reality. So there is a certain surprise.
If you could shrink in terms of time the process of physical construction of the painting, so you had the choice.
Yeah, somebody else. So that's why some people would give it to somebody else to do it.
But would you choose to do that if you could shrink the time? I mean, but still have it done the same quality level yourself?
No, because I almost feel being separated from my work for a while. Somebody else finished it. It would be very hard for me to I didn't touch it fully, myself. I didn't sweat. It is not fully mine. It's stupid, but that's what the way I feel. That's why I make own stretcher, everything, frame them. In the past, I used to drive them, rent a truck, and say somebody else drove it for me, and things of this nature. I want the totalness to experience. It's my doing, right?
You want to take responsibility for it?
I'm fully responsible. Partially, maybe it is embedded in me because when I lost my arm, the people used to say, well, I will never survive,
After all the years that you've spent exploring, do you feel any closer to understanding what art is than when you started?
No. As I said that quote the other day to you, who has art, even religion has he. He who has no art, let him be religious be. To me, I almost don't separate the two. Honestly. Because this is the human aspiration. Say, who the hell are we? Why are we so lonely, locked in our own bodies? We want to extend and communicate beyond the formalities of our communication. Because you want to shatter that loneliness. isn't it? Why do you look at art? I can reverse that. It's the same thing, but I'm looking for. Except I am caught by trying to be a doer. And I'm not saying that everybody has a stamina to be that. You have to give up a lot of things to be a creative person.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Proszę bardzo. Finito. Opposing directional speeds of the linear aspect, it gives you a great cushion. So the surface is not dead surface, but it is racing and falling. You know, yet it is self-contained. The imposition of the realism, it is so selfish that it wants to be more and more realistic, being more like a photograph. A photograph wants to be a physical reality.
Let's take a look at, I guess this is a woodcut?
Woodcut, yeah. Well, everybody was cutting linoleum cuts, woodcuts, etchings, and so on. I was making a print, and with one hand, I couldn't afford linoleum or something like that. So I would pick up a scrap of wood somewhere, you know, and try to chisel it out. But since having one arm, it's hard to push it in all the time and keep the instrument sharp enough to cut it. The woodcut is such an incredible invasion between dark and light, and very sharp edge. And I love that idea. So I can see clearly the visual activity and measure it. And I would violate the anatomical makeup in many cases because I knew what's there, but then I'm not illustrating anatomy. I'm trying to find out what the surface does when I violate between light and dark. And the woodcut is a beautiful medium to do that.
I think we've got one more here that we brought out.
Art. So I went to Boro Polytechnic, and Boro Polytechnic, you know, just chairman of the department, he says, well, I advise you, what you could do is a book illustration. You know, so that's why I had this scratch boards, you know, and I was trying to make this lettering, and there was a life drawing and everything else, and the art history and whatnot. The school was known more or less for medicine and law, not for art. But they did train art as well, especially for teaching. When I came to America, I came with one suitcase and 4 of us. $50 in my pocket, 4 of us, 1 suitcase, no jobs. And I wanted to go to school. It was rough.
After you got here to Cleveland, you enrolled almost right away at the Art Institute.
Yes, because I wanted to continue my education.
Talk about this drawing. I mean, what do you see in it? I mean, what's the activity?
Well, it was the line itself, how beautifully can present duality. You know, you make a line, you are not looking at the line, but both sides. A line is so instrumental to form separate densities of the field. It would be forward, inward, complex or non-complex. And then taking time of making darker surfaces, yet by
Julian, first of all, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I know you said that you didn't know that you would drift into the visual arts, but rather music was your first love.
I thought I would spend maximum of my time with music when I grow up, when I was a kid. I thought that would be pleasant to do, interesting to do. But when I lost my right arm, I was confused for good 4 or 5 years. My desires, suddenly I have been robbed of my desires. And the people were not very helpful because they would offer pity. I don't want pity. I want a reality and support. Since I have an ability to move the pencil or charcoal, you know, I just start scribbling. I said, that's fascinating. That's the way it started. I said, why not?
So music would have been the preferred vehicle because of your arm and the difficulties with that, and,
absolutely.
And shifting to say, maybe I can channel these same desires, thoughts, feelings in a different way.
Yes. You get terribly affected. I never saw one before. Yeah. Or the flowers, or the plants, or the sounds, yeah. Or the beat of the drums. It's scary if you don't know what's going to happen next. There was a Jesuit brother in the camp, a refugee camp, and he was writing daily events, what happened in the camp, and he needed somebody to help him to illustrate that, you know. And he saw some of my drawings, and he says, would you do this? I did it for him.
But I take a look at something like this, which I guess it's what, an ink?
Yes.
Ink drawing. But I mean, even with this, I mean, it's a series of like
dashes, lines,
dashes, crosshatches.
Yeah. Well, trying to do it with the simplistics of the line, try to mimic more or less, you know, what is happening over there. Those are the huts, you know, made out of a grass, you know, that I lived in. Or like, for instance, this thing here, see, just tree and other things. It's the damn mist, a fog, you know, or, you know, and the smell and or the wetness, you know. There are so many things that are happening around us.
I mean, did you crave or did you want some sort of formal training, either in Africa? When you were in Africa?
Because I was asking myself, you know, just how come these people seem to know so much visually, so many things, and where is art? What is art? What is decor? All this separation? What is the pattern making or painting your face? And what is really a shareable human experience, when we call it by the nature, because that area that I have been to, it was East Equatorial Africa, and it is a jungle next to me. It was on the border of jungle, just walking distance, half a mile, and we were between savannah and the jungle, which extended itself all the way to Belgium, Congo. You know, and the phenomenon of the light source, changing colors, and vegetation, it's really a paradise lost. I never saw anything like that, and I was terribly affected by it. And especially I was affected by it because in Russia I experienced winters and gray, cold, and whatnot. But then being in Iran, in Tehran and so on, deserts and going all the way to Basra. It's nothing but desolate deserts and dry. And you get fascinated by that. Or in India, actually Pakistan, Karachi. And then suddenly you come in and you sit on the equator in this luscious jungle. And the phenomenon of the life that exists over there. As I said, it's a paradise.
Was there something
Yes.
special about Africa?
Wow, yeah. What God created, it's unbelievable. Look at zebra. Almost when you see it for the first time, if you never saw one, and especially in the wild, I said, this must be a joke. Or giraffe comes in, and looks down at you, it's unbelievable. How can't you be affected if you're not